Part 1. The Frozen Road. It was a night like no other. The kind of night where the world seems to hold its breath, suspended in a frozen silence, as if nature itself was waiting for something to break the stillness. The snow had been falling for hours, heavy, relentless flakes, each one adding to the growing white blanket that covered the earth. The wind howled like a wounded animal, whipping through the trees and sending the occasional eerie creak through the stillness of the night. Everything was blanketed in an unnatural calm, and that in itself was unsettling. The roads were treacherous, slick with ice, but that didn't stop Jack from heading out. He had no choice. His parents lived an hour away, in a small house on the edge of the forest. A call from his mother earlier in the evening had warned him about the storm, but Jack, in his usual defiant manner, thought he could handle it. He was wrong. Jack's car, an aging Subaru, struggled to grip the icy surface of the road, tires slipping and screeching as he tried to navigate the sharp bends. The headlights cut through the snowstorm, casting only a faint, eerie glow in front of him. The world outside seemed to disappear into the thick, swirling darkness. The only thing Jack could see was the reflection of his tired face in the rearview mirror and the dim outlines of snow-covered trees looming on either side of the road. "Just keep going," Jack muttered to himself. "It's only an hour. I'll be fine." But the storm was relentless, and as he pressed on, the thought of turning back began to gnaw at him. The snow was piling up faster than he anticipated, and the wind was picking up, making visibility almost impossible. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as the road grew steeper, and the trees on either side of the car seemed to close in. Then, just as he rounded a particularly sharp bend, something caught his eye. A figure, barely visible in the blinding snowstorm, it stood at the edge of the road, motionless. For a split second, Jack thought it might have been a trick of the light. But as he drew closer, the figure didn't move. It wasn't a person, at least, not in the traditional sense. It was too tall, too thin, and the way it stood, unnaturally still, made the hair on the back of Jack's neck rise. The figure wore a long, ragged coat that seemed to blend into the storm itself, and its face was obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, shadowing any features that might have been there. It could have been anyone, someone lost in the storm, trying to flag him down, maybe, but something about it made Jack's stomach tighten in fear. Instinctively, Jack slowed the car. His mind screamed at him to keep going, to not stop, but the car skidded, and his foot pressed down on the brake without thinking. The figure didn't move. "Hello?" Jack called, his voice trembling more than he expected. The wind swallowed his words almost immediately, and the silence that followed felt impossibly thick. He blinked, trying to focus, but the figure was still there. The snow swirled around it like a vortex, the outline of its body dissolving into the storm. Then, the figure moved. It wasn't a slow movement. No, it was sudden, too quick for Jack to even register before it reached out and slammed its hand onto the hood of his car. The impact was deafening. The car shuddered violently under the force and Jack froze, his breath catching in his throat. He had no idea what to do. It was as if his body had betrayed him, refusing to act. The figure bent forward, its face still hidden by the brim of its hat. And then, through the shrieking wind, Jack heard something whispers, low and guttural. The words were incomprehensible, but they weren't meant to be understood. They were meant to be felt. With a sudden, jolting motion, Jack slammed his foot down on the gas pedal. The Subaru lurched forward, tires spinning and screaming as he sped away from the figure, his heart racing. The figure didn't chase after him, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching him, that it was waiting for him to make a mistake. His hands trembled on the wheel as he drove faster, desperate to put as much distance between himself and whatever that thing was. He didn't stop again until he reached his parents' house, breathless and panicked, eyes darting around the empty streets for any sign of movement. But the figure was gone. Jack quickly slammed the door shut behind him, heart pounding in his chest. His parents, sitting by the fire, looked up in confusion as Jack stood in the hallway, his face pale. "What's wrong?" his mother asked, concern etched on her face. I saw something," Jack stammered, his mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. His father looked up from his book, half smiling. "Saw something?" "In the storm?" But Jack wasn't smiling. He was still trembling. Someone was out there, and he couldn't bring himself to explain it, not fully. Something told him that if he did, the reality of it would become too real, too close to something that could hurt him. But even as he tried to push the thought out of his mind, he felt it, a cold, creeping presence watching him from somewhere outside. Somewhere just beyond the window, where the storm raged on and where, if he was brave enough to look, he might see that figure again. He didn't look. He couldn't. Jack would later wish he hadn't seen it at all. What he didn't know, what he didn't realize, was that this would only be the beginning. The storm outside grew worse as the night wore on, and Jack couldn't help but feel that something had followed him here. Something had attached itself to him, something from that desolate, snow-covered road. And it wasn't finished with him yet. To be continued.